Welcome to Beyond the Comfort Zone Live, a show that helps you step out of your comfort zone into a place of growth and learning. For those of you joining us for the first time, I'm Aviva Leebow, and I'm a Vistage Chair in Atlanta, Georgia. I lead two groups of incredibly driven and ambitious CEOs who want to accelerate toward their goals faster. In addition, I facilitate a group of growth-oriented key executives who are dedicating to driving transformational change within their organizations. Our peer groups are powerful mastermind collectives where members come together regularly to share ideas and experiences and support one another. No matter how many years of experience a leader has, the reality is their knowledge and experiences are still limited. They don't know what they don't know because they haven't been exposed to it yet. A peer environment creates valuable opportunities to explore the unknown, be more proactive, and make better decisions. By leveraging the collective wisdom and diverse perspectives of their peers, members are able to achieve more than they ever could on their own. Our guest today is John Wichmann. John is the founder and CEO of Gather Sciences and the creator of Balanced Hybrid, a data-driven platform for creating purpose-driven and sustainable hybrid work models. John developed Balanced Hybrid, combining his years of experience leading teams and working with senior executives to maximize values from workplaces. Balanced Hybrid is uniquely designed to help an organization capture the significant benefits of a hybrid work model without negatively impacting growth, agility, or the learning and development of its associates. In today's post-COVID environment, where hybrid work is at increasing risk of being eliminated, John is a leading voice for intentional and purpose-driven hybrid work strategies and their ability to unlock growth and cost reductions for organizations, career and well-being benefits for employees, and reduced impact on our environment. Without further ado, I would like to welcome John to the show. John, thank you for being on Beyond the Comfort Zone.
Thanks, Aviva. It's great to be on. Thank you for having me.
So I asked John specifically to be on the show because one of the things we talk about in peer groups all the time is hybrid workforce, remote workforce. Do we bring them back to the office? And it's such a hot topic because I don't think anybody really feels confident that they know how to do it right. Looking out and balancing all of the things that John is working to sort through and with Balanced Hybrid. Before we jump into talking more about hybrid and balanced workforce, can you tell people a little bit about Gather Sciences and what your background is?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Gather Sciences really was formed and formulated to help ensure the sustainability of hybrid work as a go-forward model for organizations. Really, the impetus of that was from really, I would say, my immersion in everything workplace, everything hybrid. In the last company I had, I was a co-founder of a workplace management solution called Maptician, and really we were right in the middle of everything. We had our first 10 customers when the pandemic hit, and we had to pivot a couple of times. So that really provided a front row seat to all things return, all things hybrid as that emerged, and really provided visibility to what I saw as an emerging set of challenges really around hybrid. But on the other side of that, a real clear understanding of the true potential that could be tapped with a well-implemented hybrid program. And my background is data and analytics. Prior to that, I was with Teradata for 8 years and led services teams and practices working with some of the largest companies in the world, and thought that this would really be a great area to really combine data science and AI, generative AI, to bring together, and really common sense, I think, and really what worked and what we saw work, bring that together in a platform solution to help companies navigate this particular area.
Yeah, it's very interesting and different perspective because most people are talking about hybrid from a people culture perspective, not necessarily from the data behind it and how you can use it to be more effective. I think we've all seen lots of recent headlines about organizations, big organizations, small, eliminating hybrid work programs, bringing back people back into the office. I'm curious why you think it's happening and if you think it's a sign of things that are going to continue coming.
So unfortunately, it's because in many cases, the hybrid models that are being followed right now, or I guess I use the term model loosely because they are very loose and in many cases overly flexible. those are causing real issues for companies and for CEOs. And CEOs are starting to recognize that. Well, they probably recognized it for some time, but it's really now, maybe with the length of time that's gone on, maybe with the shift of the softer job market, they feel maybe more empowered to try to take that on. The challenge we see, however, is that where they go is, well, this isn't working, so let's go back to what we had before, which we believe is also not the right solution. So we do believe when we talk to CEOs, we hear about really a general loss of momentum. We do hear about loss of productivity. And even if it's not productivity, sometimes it's maybe the same amount of work is going on, but it's not going on related to the most important things for the business at that time, which can be just as bad as lower productivity if you're doing work in the wrong areas. Onboarding and knowledge transfer is also a huge challenge that we hear, whether that's a partner-led firm like a law firm or an accounting firm, where the whole apprenticeship model is really taking a hit with hybrid work. But there's real issues going on. So I know sometimes CEOs get come out as the villain in this topic, which I really don't think they should, because they are truly working to react to genuine impact, negative impact that's happening to their organizations. We're trying to help them, attack that and address those in a way other than going back to the way things were 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting because that conversation comes up a lot, because the points you're raising, they're points everybody's feeling working with the CEOs that I work with. The question is, what's the right way to tackle them? And I think a lot of people are going back to, we've got to just, bring everybody back in. And so I'm curious, you're hearing that, you're talking about that there's a way to be in a balanced hybrid approach. Do you think these companies are making a mistake pulling people back in, generally speaking, or is that an opportunity to work that way as well?
Yes, for sure. Well, it's, as I said, it's for valid reasons. I do think that full come back 5 days for most companies isn't necessary, and with some intentionality and planning and a common shared why, that would really allow them to find that middle ground for them. So we do believe it's very possible, and we developed, as you mentioned, a best practice framework called Balanced Hybrid. And what Balanced Hybrid does is it essentially says that a best practice approach to hybrid will combine, bring together the right people at the right time and frequency into an inviting, engaging, collaborative office environment, physical environment, then really to do the things that matter most when you're together. And so what we've found is, by combining those things and then we're putting at the center of that really an improved shared why, right? That executives and leaders, senior leaders and first level leaders and associates can all really agree on and believe that it's reasonable. So we believe when we bring those together, and certainly having that all on a foundation of accountability and visibility, because sometimes those are lacking in organizations as well, that really does yield really very high value result that can benefit employees, it can benefit growth, and come up with cost savings. Employees are happier, less time in the car, many benefits.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's also, when you think about it, there are a lot of benefits for both employees and employers of a hybrid environment. But it's a matter of doing it the right way. You talk about a data-driven approach and trying to match how people are, like, that people are there at the right times doing the right things. How does Gather Science, and how do you create this balanced hybrid work model? How do you find this out? Is there an assessment you're doing, or what's the process look like to develop an ideal hybrid environment?
It is. It's a element of, say, understanding from the executives to everybody else in the organization, and where they sit and what they view as valuable. And then it really, there's a data analysis element as well. And so what we're trying to really do is, once we have sort of an element of common ground, is to essentially bring together the needs and desires and sentiment of different areas of that organization, because we believe that we don't believe in one size fits all for an organization, and certainly not across organizations. We believe that within an organization, you're going to have functional areas that have very different needs from one another as it relates to time in the office and out of the office. We could look back 5+ years and look at sales organizations. I think we could all agree that sales teams never operate like anybody else in an organization, right? And so they were out in the field, they drop in, they'd be gone. They just did what they needed to do. And there's a number of reasons for that. One, obviously, there's a highly accountable structure to that, to comp and to whether you're doing well or not. There's that, but really it's more about they needed to be out with customers and prospects and things like that. So really what all that we've learned through the pandemic and working from home, remote work, and all the new capabilities we've brought to bear, our belief is that, well, why now that we have those capabilities, does marketing and finance need to be the same? Just like sales is different, we believe there's differences across those different functions. And that's what we see when we work across organizations. We see much more commonality between two finance organizations than we do between two manufacturing organizations. And that's really where we believe those breaks happen. And when we're looking at a purpose-driven, intentional approach to hybrid, where employees feel there's high value for coming into the office, that's how to really achieve that. And so we work to help facilitate that in a really, I'd say, a data-informed process.
So you mentioned some of the specific challenges that I hear regularly. Less productivity, onboarding is a huge one. How do we take knowledge from this, experienced person from 20 years and get it into this brand new person? How do you, in your system, overcome some of those challenges? Let's talk about maybe the top 2 or 3 challenges you're seeing. Let's start there. What are they? And then how do CEOs, what can they do to address some of them?
Sure. I would say one of the first is really a lack of understanding of something other than a binary option. Either I have to live with what I have now with hybrid, which I don't like very much, or we have to go back to the way it is. So I think one is just really educating and saying, hey, there is a third way. We can find a middle ground that will help to ensure that you can embrace all the benefits of hybrid without having it negatively impact the organization's growth or success, or the growth or success of any of the associates within it. That's really sort of where we find a lot of common ground, is because if you think about that and you say, hey, is it reasonable that hybrid should not impact the company or its company's growth in a negative way, or any of the associates or people in our company? Well, most people agree on that. And that's a great area for common ground. We've found time and time again. And so following that, it's really sometimes a hyper focus on this whole productivity question, where the typical argument goes, well, if I don't have to drive in, then I'm going to save all this time in the car and I'm going to be more productive at home. And in a nutshell, that sure you could say, well, gee, that sort of makes sense. But the reality is, not many jobs can sort of sustain this forever, this sort of a unlimited level of work from home, where you can just do by yourself and you don't need any help. I mean, any jobs that are that remote capable probably have already been outsourced, or probably will become outsourced if you can really do them solo to that level of isolation, if you will. And so the productivity topic sort of breaks down. And one of the other things we find is when we're talking to groups of employees or at a town hall and trying to help communicate this, sometimes it's about communicating that the idea of coming into the office is more than about just your productivity. It's about what else you bring to the organization and to your associates, and that does help to really change mindsets. So we do really combine sort of that data science and then the psychology of it, I guess, to appeal to people's desires to be together and to contribute.
So when you're looking at solutions for an individual role, because I heard you earlier say it's not one size fits all, different roles are going to have different needs. How How do you determine how many days they need to be together? What working together looks like? Some of those basic questions about what hybrid could look like for a particular role.
Sure. Well, we try not to be too prescriptive in that. We believe that the individuals who are leading those disciplines are in the best position to make those determinations and those calls. We do believe it needs to be within some overall parameters set by the CEO or managing partner or that executive leadership team, so that there's some commonality there. And then there's appropriate consistency. Doesn't mean everybody in the company certainly needs to be the same, but if you have two like groups, for example, dev team one and dev team two, or there should be some consistency there, unless there's a real good reason that they're not consistent. Type of project, complexity of the project, different things like that. But we do find that usually those individuals who are leading those areas and those department division team have a very good handle on that and are in a good position to really make that call.
So then the guidance you're providing is more specific, not to the do it exactly this way prescriptive, but these are the types of things you need to be looking for to make it a stronger hybrid approach.
Right. So we're providing an overall framework. We're providing a roadmap on how to get from from A to Z, from where they're at to where they're going. In some cases, we can, if they want us to help and sort of carry that whole thing through, we can do that. But we're just as open to and able to just equip them, right? Equip them with the roadmap, with the data outputs, to really, when they're doing that, that area planning process on what is our hybrid plan going to be for our area or our group division, that is a very data informed process. So we are doing a very targeted, specific survey that we've gotten great results from around this topic to associates, a different one to leaders, so that we can bring all that together and then show one department how, within their department they compare, they can see how that looks across departments, and really allow them to say, okay, I feel much more informed about what the people in our department are thinking, so we can respond in terms of our planning. Because when you ask people for their feedback and they provide the feedback, they want to know that it's been reviewed. And if they see evidence that it's been considered and put into practice, that can really benefit a lot, right, as you're going through this process. And we believe there's no better way to really create that plan than to do it with data that's coming from people who are within your teams or your organization.
Company brings you in and says, we realize we need to do hybrid differently. There's a better way. And so they embrace you as for, doing the assessment and that work. They go to implement a strategy and they have that manager who absolutely either must have their people in, or the one who really doesn't care and is still willing to let other people go remote. How do you guide companies in handling those two extreme scenarios?
Right. Well, sometimes it helps to have a third party so they can point at us for people who are mad about one particular part or another. And so we can take the heat for that. But then again, because balanced hybrid is a purpose-based approach, it really is designed so that you can have a very direct conversation with anybody at any level and say, hey, this is why we're doing this. And we believe it's the right thing. And we took care to take in input from across our organization. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody's going to be happy with every element of this. We can't make everybody happy. We understand that. But understand that we're all working against this common goal to say we want to embrace hybrid, but in a way that doesn't damage the organization, its growth, or the growth and success of the individual within our organization. And that could be somebody new joining who wants to be able to ramp up. It could be someone who needs to have a quick response from another teammate, right? And so you have to box these in. So one is pointed us. Two is we do advocate for having a policy that is appropriate for a little bit more structured. You can't really just take all the work from home, policy from 5 or 6 years ago and just sort of dust it off and say, well, this is what we do. You really have to have a policy that's purposeful against a hybrid model, or there's going to be gaps all over it. And people who want to game it or have a propensity to game the system will game the system. And so we've developed, we think, fair and appropriate advisement around that, about things to put in a policy that people think, hey, that's reasonable. I may not love it, but it's reasonable. So there's that structure, and then you obviously need to measure and hold people and teams accountable for doing that. And you're right. Sometimes we'll see managers are more resistant to this than some of the associates, especially, younger associates understand the importance, honestly, more often than not, of being around people who can teach them things. Sometimes it's your middle or some of your upper managers who are a little more resistant. Sometimes that's just changing the framework of the conversation and helping them understand how they add value beyond their just sort of productivity, if you will.
So you mentioned measuring things. What are some metrics or insights that you can share that organizations should be looking at as they're making these decisions?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I'd say one of the most surprising, and I guess it's just sometimes I don't think about it this, or the last 4 years have gone so quickly. But when we go in, one of the things we do is give them a reflection back of sort of by department or group, what that tenure looks like, and also what percent of the organization or group has been hired since COVID. And we're now being 4 years. If you look at just general turnover plus companies that are growing, it's not uncommon. We'll get 60+% of the entire organization that was hired post lockdowns. So if you think about, if you were there and you think about, the culture and how we did things 5 years ago, and then think about people joining at all these little different phases during the lockdowns and after and all that, it's a completely different environment. And even within organizations, we'll see teams that are 90+% brand new from a standpoint of a post lockdown hire. And so to try to maintain that culture, it really takes a lot of intentionality and effort. So I'd say that is one. The other one is probably one of the things we measure is kind of our net promoter score, if you will, for sort of hybrid success, and it's called the OES, or Office Experience Score. And we ask, as kind of our core question, and we'll benchmark against it and ask it again after we work with them, or if they put the process through, which just says, in the last 45 days, how often has your in-office experience been worth your commute? Right? Just single question, and it's never, seldom, sometimes, usually, or always. And it's a 1 to 5 scale rating, and most companies land around that 3 range, a little above, a little below, which, when we talk to senior leaders, we say, essentially what they're saying is, without saying it, is they're saying about half the time they think their commute wasn't worth it. That you're essentially wasting their time about half the time you're forcing them to come in. And if you can think about that, nobody likes their time wasted. That's probably one of everybody's top 5 things that frustrate them. And if you have employees who actively think that their drive-in is a waste of time most of the time, that's not going to do good things for retention, for employee engagement scores, likely to recommend, things like that.
So what's an average score that you've seen for companies that are doing hybrid exceptionally well?
It's probably in the the high 3s into the 4s, is probably where because you do have some people that are a little bit harder to move. Although what we've seen is that the approach that we recommend or help them implement really does help move your people who are the never and the seldoms, helps really move them off of those very low end of the scale, which is good because sometimes they have the most negative attitudes as well, and that can be somewhat caustic to other folks in their group. So we're able to move them up, and then our goal is to move everybody up at least 1 level, through the process. Other than, we're not going to necessarily get somebody to always, if they're a usually, we're like, okay, that's good. We'd love you to go to an always, but we'll take usually. But we really do try to move everybody else up 1 or more levels on that, up and to the right.
So if companies are doing their own work on this and making changes, a question like that could be a really good before and after to get a sense of.
Absolutely.
are they
Yep,
moving the needle?
absolutely. And we're happy to help them sort of put that in place and ask that. We have some tools and templates we can provide to them, and we don't charge them anything additional for that.
Well, um, companies that are doing, just because this topic comes up so much, especially with what you just shared about the statistics of how many people are new since COVID, which is mind-boggling when you think about it. Um, what organizations that are doing hybrid really well, what is onboarding looking like that you're seeing for them?
Well, I'd say that it's an area that we see is a constant challenge. We really do advocate for being intentional about that, and so when you're onboarding, ensuring that that experience is going to be one in which that individual is going to be surrounded by people who can pour into them for the that critical early period, and that will certainly vary by group. It'll vary by the job discipline, by how early the person is. I mean, if you bring a person in who's fresh out of school versus a person who is just new to your company but is experienced in what they're doing already, you're hiring a somewhat or a semi, reasonably experienced or a highly experienced person. There's going to be different needs for that. But that is one of the things in that hybrid planning process that we have that is covered in great detail, is ensuring that not only does everybody have a plan for how they're going to do hybrid, how often, and all those elements really of balanced hybrid that I'd mentioned, but also what does that onboarding plan look like? Because that's a
Mhm.
critical element of it. Because you may not operate the same way when a new person comes on as you do, generally speaking.
So a balanced hybrid approach might look like one thing during normal times, but if a new team member is coming on, it might shift for a couple of months or time period until things
Exactly.
have shifted and then kind of go back to a different approach.
Exactly. And so we're facilitating that really in mass, right, across an organization so that a CEO has confidence that it's not just, well, it's in the policy, but there's real confidence that that's happening. It's documented, it's clear, it's been thought through, and then there's follow up to ensure that it's happening.
One of the things you mentioned earlier was making sure that organizations are doing the most important work when people are physically together. Um, I'm curious if you've noticed any trends on what that type of work looks like, that really should be done more when people are in the office together versus when they're out.
Yeah, for sure. I'd say the one that always, not surprisingly, jumps to the top is really onboarding and knowledge transfer. So
Mhm.
whether folks are remotely positioned, or whether they're hybrid, or whether they're in office, that one is almost a universal sort of first place. I'd say culture, camaraderie, collaboration, those really follow right along with that. If there's some complex planning, uh, for example, sprint planning, a development team would be a
Mhm.
good example, or an after action kind of a sprint review. That would be another one. So um, I'd say those where there's that that collaboration and the communication going back and forth. I'd say that those are the ones that are probably most typical. And then obviously the individual work activity, people generally recognize that when you talk about your asynchronous sort of tasks, that those are better for focused remote time.
Hmm. Are you seeing a lot of companies that you're working with have set days for in office where everybody's there together, or certain teams are there together, and then the other days everybody's more asynchronous? Or um, is that kind of the shift
Yeah,
people are going to?
it's all over the board, quite honestly. You'll get everything from it's this many days a week or this many days a month you pick, or so you get a lot of the you picks, and I think that's really where hybrid starts to break down. If there's too much individual choice, which I understand why. I mean, that all evolved out of the individual choice, that because it was a health and safety component to it in the early days and pre-vaccines, and we had all of the stuff going on with masks and vaccines and all that. It was very much extended almost universally as an individual choice. Well,
Mhm.
people got very used to individual choice, and they sort of assumed that was always how it would go. And that's really, I think, what we're dealing with now is sort of, I'd say, reverberations, still ripples from that. So sort of an evolved hybrid. So we think adding more structure is very important to ensuring that if we are going to spend fewer days together, that we're ensuring that we're, indeed spending them together and that we're doing things that count when we are together.
Mhm. You had mentioned to me before we got on here about the Safe Hybrid initiative that Gather Sciences is launching. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and how my audience can get involved if they're interested?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking. So we've created, because we believe so strongly in the benefits of hybrid, and we also see the risks of it of going away over time as companies continue to experience negative impacts of hybrid the way it may currently be implemented at their organizations. We've kicked off a Save Hybrid campaign. So individuals who want to help out, like by providing their feedback and their experiences, can go to savehybrid.com, just take a 5-minute survey and give us their feedback and perspectives about hybrid work and what they think either they see is working well within their organization, maybe within their group or maybe another group, or what they believe is needed to be done to have some of that success around hybrid. We believe that in most companies, hybrid is being done well in pockets, but not being done well overall, and not really being structured or measured or tracked or tuned at an enterprise level. It's sort of very general. So we're really utilizing this information to help provide better guidance to organizations that we can really help to ensure, again, our mission to ensure that hybrid work is something that can be here to stay. To be sustainable and something that's here to stay, it has to, right? It has to be something that doesn't negatively impact an organization or its growth or the folks in it. And so we know that's there. We've seen it. We've helped implement it. And we believe that through this Save Hybrid initiative, we're going to be able to get even broader swath of input and ideas that have worked well so we can share those with others.
Yeah. When we had a conversation before this, you gave me some statistics that were astounding around some of the reasons why hybrid is important to a company, not just the employees, that the flexibility is nice or from a benefit standpoint, but for an actual company's overarching success and benefit. I'd be curious if you could share some of those.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I mean, we're seeing more and more studies come out now that employees greatly prefer hybrid work. I've seen 87% prefer a hybrid model to a non-hybrid model. You see upwards of 60% of folks who might quit if they were asked to come back or think about quitting, 60% or more. So from a company's perspective, there's a real risk and a real danger of attrition on the experienced associate side. Equally so, though, if they don't fix hybrid and a new associate, somebody or a new like top grad they just hired and spent all this time and energy recruiting, those individuals are not going to typically stay with the company if they don't believe it's an environment where they can learn and grow in these critical early years of their career. And so while pulling everybody back 5 days can certainly drive away and increase attrition of probably your more seasoned resources, you can have similar levels of attrition of those new hires if you have a super loose one. So there's really around that I'd say that people side. Then what we found just from our own really experience and analysis is that really through a well implemented hybrid program that has the right amount of structure, a company can save upwards of 30% on their real estate costs over time, which, given how expensive commercial real estate is, can be a very significant driver. And also gives them much more flexibility about how and when they move and how often they need to increase space. There's also a environmental component that we believe is very important. When we look at this, and we communicate to our clients, we talk about really the impact, right, or the carbon footprint, if you will. Really, if you think about a 5-day a week and a 2.5-day a week, on average, and for every 100 employees that go from 2.5 to 5 days in the office, it's around 181 metric tons of CO2 being added back into the environment by doing that. And so where companies do have those environmental goals and carbon reductions, forcing folks back in these, sort of 5-day-a-week things, if they're really looking at it, we believe in the right way, they would see that that's counterproductive. And if they move in the other direction, we think it's very reasonable to claim that, given that there are some very, very large companies right now that have gone back to 5 days. And so you can kind of benchmark savings against a 5-day, in office approach.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like from a financial savings perspective and environmental perspective, there's so many different reasons to do hybrid. I find really, the comparison you made earlier between retention, if you don't do hybrid well, or you completely remote, or you have everybody back in the office, you have the same exact risks within a company. So finding that balanced approach in the middle really is the best way to retain your team and really invest in them, and therefore have the best results for your company as well.
Yeah, we believe so, and we've seen that in through our conversations with folks at all levels of organizations and in the results.
Now, many CEOs have already made the call to pull everybody back to work. How would you advise a CEO who has done that, who is now watching this and going, "Oops, maybe I shouldn't have done that"?
Sure. We really think there is an opportunity to really build that into the story, bringing folks back to try to address a true need and a true impact that the business was seeing. And I don't think a CEO can be faulted for that, because they were really just doing what they were hired to do, which is to protect the success and growth of the company and the folks in it. We do think there's a great opportunity for them to be able to utilize, for example, the balanced hybrid approach or framework, to then say, hey, we're going to take a more refined look at this and see if we can fine tune this and open up some fine tuning within our different department areas. So to move from sort of where we went to, and then start to have a more targeted approach while still preserving the goals and reasons that they, went to that in the first place. So we think it can tell a good story, and certainly there's great opportunity for moving customer or employee sat up, because you're coming from potentially a very unpleasant kind of working experience 5 days in to something much better. So we think there's a huge opportunity for positive lift around engagement and employee satisfaction with this, and we think they can save a whole lot of money in the interim and tell a different story when they're doing recruiting than the one they probably have been challenged to successfully tell as they're trying to hire people into a 5-day-a-week set of roles.
Now, you mentioned office space before, and even that, there's a lot of stories around, right? Some still have the same amount of traditional office space. They are maybe using it well or not using it at all. And others eliminated their offices and are now needing to figure out what new space should look like. How do you guide or advise companies to look at office space and design it in a way that really supports a balanced hybrid approach?
Sure. Well, we think that the first key is ensuring you have a plan that you can follow. Because when you have a plan and approach that's predictable, then it allows you to project what you need and when you need it. So we think that's at the core of it. Following that, we do, and I'm a big believer in tools around that. So that was the type of tool that I had at my last company that I had co-founded that company, Maptition. So Maptition's an excellent tool to help an organization really connect the people to the space, not only sort of where they sit, but when they sit, where they sit. So you could look, hey, next Thursday, who's coming in, who's going to be in, when I'm in, and allows you to start to see visibility in an environment where you can't just assume everybody's in every day. And so it's one of our first recommendations, in addition to this, is really to have a tool set or have an IWMS that's well equipped. And my obviously close experience with Maptition, I helped design and form that. And so I know that it works really well for this use case. And there's other tools out there. But I would say, especially now, if you really want to take advantage of this opportunity to save money, use space more effectively, and help employees connect with other employees and onboard better, there's no better time than now to pick up an IWMS for your organization. I think it's a critical must-have solution for companies.
Well, it's been wonderful chatting with you today. What is the best way for our listeners to connect with you if they have questions or they're interested in engaging Gather Sciences to do some balanced hybrid work with them?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they can reach out on LinkedIn as well. Reach out on our website, gathersciences.com, and I'd love to connect with them. Just talk through this and see if there might be something we could help, or maybe we could just answer some questions for them. We'd be happy to do that.
And a question I ask every guest I have on here, because it wouldn't be beyond the comfort zone if I didn't. What is something out of your comfort zone that you have never done before?
Oh, I've never jumped out of an airplane with a parachute on. I don't think I would.
Oh, it's a lot of fun. So
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, you'll have to get me up to speed on that. I've always thought it would be difficult to jump out of a perfectly good airplane. So
it's funny because I get that a lot and I've done it 3 times. So
that's good.
well, thank you so much, John, for joining me today. It's been an honor to have you as a guest on the show. And thank you to everyone who's joined us. Until next time on Beyond the Comfort Zone, I encourage all of my viewers to try something new outside your comfort zone, whether it's approaching hybrid work in a new way or jumping out of an airplane, because that's where growth occurs and life begins. Have a great day, everyone.